Most people, when they reflect on life's journey, might suggest that marriage marks the cessation of individual freedom, the quiet grave of a life once lived solely for oneself. Yet, for a man like Tanaka Makoto, a member of the enigmatic Black Dog Guild, a different kind of ending had already arrived. For him, employment itself felt like a perpetual interment, a daily burial of personal time and aspiration. For nearly half his years, Tanaka had been tethered to a desk, an unseen supervisor orchestrating the dangerous missions of adventurers who plunged into the world's newly revealed abysses. Even as the city lights softened into the muted blues of early morning, long past midnight, Tanaka remained fixed in his work, a silent sentinel of the guild. There was no other path, no other recourse. A profound weariness clung to him, a craving for rest that he dared not voice, for this relentless occupation was all he possessed. But his was no ordinary desk job, and the true weight of it, the unusual demands it placed upon him, were about to become undeniably clear. To understand Tanaka's current state, his resigned dedication to a life he barely lived, we must first journey back a decade. It was then that humanity's perception of its own world irrevocably shifted. Without warning, colossal, alien structures pierced the fabric of reality across the globe, immediately dubbed dungeons. These structures brought with them inhabitants unlike anything previously conceived, creatures of varying sizes and grotesque forms, whose sole, chilling purpose was undeniably hostile. As these dungeons multiplied, seeding themselves across continents, a wave of primal panic cascaded through society. Chaos unfurled as these monstrous entities spilled from their dimensional rifts, spreading fear and destruction. Humanity, caught off guard, initially found itself utterly defenseless. Some tried to fight, to stem the tide, while others simply succumbed to a perceived inescapable fate. Hope seemed a distant, fading ember. Yet, amidst the terror, a remarkable discovery was made. Those brave or desperate, enough to venture into the nascent dungeon depths, stumbled upon an unexpected bounty. Weapons, forged with technology utterly foreign, powerful artifacts that materialized alongside these new, unknown realms. This revelation ignited a new kind of human endeavor. People transformed into explorers, venturing into the perilous dungeons, not just for survival, but for these technological wonders and, more pressingly, for the promise of unimaginable treasures. But, as one might instinctively expect, these newly accessible realms were far from safe. The unspoken truth, understood by all, was that to enter a dungeon unprotected was to invite a swift and brutal end. Death was the solitary greeter at their thresholds. The dream of exploring these mysterious caverns, at first, seemed a reckless fantasy, an impossibility for most. However, the dungeon's appearance brought another, even more profound change. Certain individuals, seemingly chosen by fate, began to awaken to extraordinary powers. Initially, the wider populace struggled to grasp the significance of these gifted few. But as they witnessed the awakened in action, their incredible strength and breathtaking skill, understanding dawned with stunning clarity. Once society grasped that these gifted individuals possessed capabilities dozens of times greater than any ordinary person, a new imperative emerged. The awakened were tasked with safeguarding the world, with restoring and maintaining peace by systematically delving into and clearing as many dungeons as their powers would allow. For Tanaka, whether by stroke of misfortune or destiny, this power had also blossomed within him. One morning, while commuting on a crowded train, Tanaka found himself a reluctant eavesdropper. A man, seemingly engrossed in conversation with his partner, spoke with fervent admiration for these dungeon explorers. It was clear that for ordinary citizens, these gifted adventurers were nothing less than modern-day superheroes, bestowed with divine strength to rescue the world from the encroaching chaos. Since direct observation of these epic battles was impossible for the average person, several enterprising companies had established streaming platforms. These sites allowed everyone to witness the raw power of the gifted firsthand. For years, a prominent dungeon exploration stream site, known simply as DTube, had captivated audiences. Through this digital window, those not blessed with special abilities could nonetheless witness the explorer's incredible prowess. The intensity with which the man on the train watched his screen confirmed Tanaka's quiet suspicion. DTube and the exploits it showcased must be immensely popular, practically a phenomenon permeating every corner of the city. Though Tanaka himself possessed these gifts, as the people of Japan often referred to them, he had never once ventured into the public eye of a stream, nor did he harbor any ambition to do so. His focus remained rigidly fixed on his arduous work. Yet the thought of it, the sheer scope of this online spectacle, stirred a quiet amazement within him. His mind, already weary to the point of brain rot from sheer exhaustion, barely registered the train reaching its destination. At Shibuya Station, Tanaka stumbled out, his eyes heavy-lidded, his card tapped listlessly against the subway gate. Even through his profound fatigue, the notion of these streamers, their lives broadcast for millions, lingered. A new question began to form. Just how much were streamers on an app like DTube actually earning? Tanaka felt the creeping weight of age, the stagnation of his own demanding, yet unrewarding, career. Perhaps, just perhaps, streaming offered an alternative, a new path for his fading ambition. With a face etched in exhaustion, he willed himself onward, pushing through the final steps to his workplace. After a brief commute, he finally arrived at the Shibuya Underground dungeon. Having signed in, Tanaka immediately made his way towards its yawning entrance. He found himself at the Shibuya Underground dungeon Onwa, poised to begin his mission. As he prepared to enter, a small, unobtrusive drone materialized behind him, a standard piece of equipment for every explorer. This device served a dual purpose. It captured footage for automatic submission to the company and, depending on its settings, could also broadcast live to a video streaming site. Given his usual routine of reporting quotas, Tanaka typically selected the company black dog button. However, the immense fatigue, the cumulative burden of his desk work, proved his undoing. As he stepped toward the dungeon entrance, his foot slipped. He had managed only a 2-hour nap that day and hadn't set foot in his own home for 2 weeks. This level of exhaustion was not merely understandable, it was a physical manifestation of his reality. In that moment of faltering, a genuine question surfaced in his mind. Why, exactly, was he subjecting himself to this relentless grind? His employer, a subcontractor for the government, was perpetually burdened with the most challenging assignments. Tanaka knew, with a chilling certainty, that he was on a direct course for death by overwork. Yet he was too consumed, too ensnared by the sheer volume of his duties, even to contemplate resignation. So, once again, with a face devoid of all vitality, he prepared to descend into the dungeon's abyss. As his hand moved to press the recording start button before entering the main dungeon antechamber, his vision wavered slightly. His phone, held carelessly, registered a different input than intended. Instead of engaging the company-specific setting, he inadvertently selected the option to broadcast live to the streaming site. Today, he was to delve into the Shibuya Underground dungeon, one of Tokyo's most expansive subterranean labyrinths. Its deepest reaches would be his workplace for the remainder of the day. Unbeknownst to Tanaka, this particular dungeon dive would irrevocably alter the trajectory of his life. While he toiled, performing his usual grueling tasks, an unseen audience watched his every move unfold live on a global stage. Utterly oblivious to the millions witnessing his journey, Tanaka pressed onward, working with the same weary efficiency as always. Meanwhile, the world beyond his dungeon walls erupted in a mixture of disbelief and morbid amusement, many convinced that this solitary figure was plunging headlong into his own demise. To fully grasp the gravity of his situation, you must understand the dungeon's structure. It is stratified into upper, middle, lower, and lowest levels. Tanaka, in his current state, was heading directly for the deepest, most treacherous tier. Typically, explorers would descend through these levels incrementally, a measured progression into greater danger. But Tanaka, with his zombie-like pallor and eye bags resembling deep bruises, had no time for such cautious approaches. His plan, to plunge straight to the very bottom in one audacious leap. Before he could commit to this descent, a wave of profound melancholy washed over him once more. The simple thought of resting in his own bed, utterly free from this hellish work, remained a persistent, tormenting whisper in the back of his mind. Overcome by exhaustion, Tanaka let his frustrations spill out. All he desired, he muttered aloud, was a moment of rest. He would consider himself the luckiest man alive if he could just manage 2 hours of sleep that day. Believing himself to be alone in his lamentations, Tanaka spoke freely, unburdened by self-consciousness. He was entirely unaware that his every word, his every move, was being scrutinized by an entire world, captivated and awaiting his next action. As his viewers, deeply empathetic to his raw sentiments, reacted, Tanaka's phone, typically silent save for work contacts, suddenly began to ring incessantly. This influx of calls baffled him. His phone contained only company numbers and a handful of old friends. He rarely engaged with social media. He dismissed the calls, assuming they would only bring further insults, and decided to ignore them. With that, Tanaka pressed on, fearlessly leaping into the lowest level of the dungeon. At the very heart of the Shibuya underground dungeon lies a colossal well. By plunging into its depths, Tanaka could bypass the upper levels and reach the lowest stratum in a single, audacious descent. Naturally, few explorers would ever attempt such a perilous maneuver. It was an act of extreme danger. Yet, deep down, Tanaka knew he would never willingly undertake this unless it was for his work, driven by the relentless pressure of meeting his quota. He was compelled to this dangerous act against his own will. Meanwhile, as Tanaka plummeted, displaying not a flicker of fear or emotion, the global audience watching his stream held its collective breath, genuinely fearing they were about to witness his imminent death. Tanaka's phone vibrated again, more insistently this time. He mentally brushed it off, convincing himself it was nothing of consequence, probably just another company call. As he once more ignored the persistent ringing, he finally registered the presence of the drone, still diligently following him. He remained uncomfortable with being filmed, but it was protocol, and he had no choice but to comply. The mere thought of being recorded, even for internal company records, filled him with a quiet anxiety, making him wonder how utterly embarrassing it would be if he were actually streaming a cruel irony, given his current, unwitting predicament. With this fleeting thought, a flicker of curiosity about public perception ignited. He wondered what kind of comments he might receive if he ever did decide to stream one day. As he inadvertently glanced toward the drone's lens, the global audience erupted in excitement. They had never encountered an explorer quite like him. While the comment section exploded with cheers, Tanaka remained utterly unaware of the commotion he was causing. After a few seconds, the ground rushed up to meet him. As he braced for impact, a monstrous presence materialized below, waiting. The now invested audience gasped in collective shock and worry. Never before had such a massive creature appeared on a live stream, its sheer scale unprecedented. Yet, with a single, weary glance, Tanaka identified his colossal adversary, a red wyvern. Despite its intimidating size, Tanaka immediately recognized it as a low-level creature. His landing had clearly been perceived as an invitation, a fresh meal dropped directly into its lair. The wyvern lunged. But Tanaka, in no mood to be inconvenienced by such a trivial monster, decided to eliminate it on the spot. With an almost bored, sleepy air, he drew his sword and effortlessly bisected the creature, all while ensuring his own graceful landing. The sheer, unassuming power Tanaka exuded silenced the entire comment section for a full minute. Disbelief rippled through the viewers. A red wyvern, a creature known for its formidable presence, had been cleaved in two with impossible ease. Such a feat, they knew, was beyond human capability. The footage of Tanaka's casual, yet devastating, skill spread like wildfire across social media platforms. His phone began to ring ceaselessly, the persistent vibrations finally pushing Tanaka to his limit. How many times had the company called him today? Just as his irritation threatened to boil over, a new wave of colossal monsters emerged, making the situation even more intense, both for the global audience and, ironically, for Tanaka himself. With so much still left to do, Tanaka barely registered the new threats arrayed before him. Being in the dungeon's lowest level meant the stakes were incredibly high, captivating every single viewer. Would Tanaka survive to unleash his true, full power, or would this be his final stand? Everyone in the world, especially those in Tokyo, understood the inherent danger of this particular region. It was common knowledge that the deepest parts of this dungeon were invariably overrun by truly powerful and deadly creatures. Armed only with his sword and an indomitable will, Tanaka resolved to push through, no matter the cost. Having dispatched the Red Wyvern, his next challenge involved confronting a formidable array of trolls, minotaurs, basilisks, and even death knights. These creatures, compared to his previous foe, were exponentially more dangerous. And to compound his grim reality, the notorious tyrant dragon also lurked nearby, ready to make Tanaka's day even more agonizing. This particular dragon was unlike any other creature Tanaka had faced before. The tyrant was infamous for its unparalleled toughness, so much so that even Tanaka, given a choice, would go to great lengths to avoid clashing with it. But this was work, a critical part of his quota, and he was undeniably alone, with no one to fall back on. He had no option but to confront this formidable beast head-on. Besides, complaining would change nothing. It was simply another mandated task. All he could do was hope for the best and commit his entire being to the fight. With that same weary expression still etched upon his face, Tanaka finally began his true day's work. Despite his profound exhaustion, Tanaka mustered every ounce of his remaining energy, fighting to stay awake, determined to bring this ordeal to a swift conclusion. His first opponents, the trolls. In this world, trolls, with their immense muscularity and terrifying visages, were renowned as some of the dungeon's most formidable creatures, often posing a significant challenge even for top-ranked explorers. Tanaka himself recalled the intense difficulty of his first encounter with them during an expedition. However, through countless subsequent battles, he had discovered a critical weakness. Despite their incredible durability, these muscular giants, surprisingly, lacked any special abilities. Through his observations after battling dozens of them, Tanaka knew that a swift cut to their necks would incapacitate them instantly. While their brute strength, bulky frames, and deadly natural weapons made them physically imposing, they were, for Tanaka, simply one of the weaker monsters inhabiting the depths, relatively easy to dispatch. This crucial information, however, was far from common knowledge, especially for those unfamiliar with the dungeon's workings or for the vast majority of citizens who had never set foot inside. Therefore, the viewers were understandably stunned as Tanaka casually dispatched multiple trolls with single, fluid sword strikes. To these ordinary observers, such an act seemed unbelievably outstanding, almost inhuman. The comment sections erupted, a torrent of shocked reactions. Many viewers asserted that trolls were rank monsters, notoriously difficult to defeat, and certainly not susceptible to a single, emotionless strike from a man who appeared so utterly devoid of effort. Witnessing such a monstrous display for the first time, some viewers even speculated that Tanaka must have resorted to trickery, perhaps editing the footage to simulate real-time action, convinced that no human, gifted or not, could possess such superhuman power. However, another segment of the audience began to believe. Perhaps Tanaka was, in fact, the real deal. The majority were astonished. Even rank explorers typically relied on a combination of weapons and strategic wit to overcome these creatures. To see Tanaka utterly dominate them on the battlefield was truly an amazing and unforgettable spectacle. More viewers flocked to the stream, eager to witness how he would handle the remaining threats. Some even began contacting the Black Dog Guild, inquiring about Tanaka's affiliation, convinced that his skills were undeniably top tier. The guild, in turn, tried repeatedly to call Tanaka, seemingly desperate to inform him of the burgeoning global phenomenon he had become. While the world reveled in Tanaka's astounding combat, Tanaka himself grew increasingly annoyed by his phone's relentless vibrations. Unaccustomed to such a barrage of notifications, he simply brushed them off, refocusing on his mission. Even as chaos consumed the outside world, including his own company, Tanaka remained oblivious, looking only bored and tired. He was so utterly immersed in the task at hand, so intent on simply getting it over with that he gave no thought to checking his phone. To heighten the drama, Tanaka now found himself preparing to face a new adversary, an iguana-like creature. This new monster, the basilisk, was an exceptionally rare encounter, so elusive that most explorers seldom came across it. Tanaka, it seemed, was an exception. While ogres were typically found in the dungeon's lower levels, the basilisk resided among the few creatures inhabiting its very deepest, most dangerous tiers. Moreover, this monster was infamous for its petrifying breath, an unavoidable exhalation that guaranteed instant death. The audience, now numbering 5 million and still growing, watched with escalating worry for Tanaka's safety. Some comments even pondered whether aspiring explorers should reconsider their dreams in the face of such terrifying realities. Tanaka, still unaware of his rapidly burgeoning global fame, remained singularly focused on the monstrous creature before him. As a seasoned veteran, he knew everything about deadly beings like the basilisk. He understood instinctively that its breath carried the power to turn flesh to stone, a swift and irreversible demise. Typically, explorers facing such a threat would rely on companions equipped with restorative items. This, however, presented one of Tanaka's greatest challenges. He was a perpetual soloist, without any companions to fall back on. His only option was to end the fight before the basilisk could even unleash its lethal weapon. With astonishing swiftness, Tanaka moved, a blur of motion, striking upwards to cleave the monster's abdomen. To the collective astonishment of the viewers, he succeeded with a single, precise move. It seemed Tanaka possessed privileged information about this particular beast. He knew that the basilisk's crucial weak spot lay beneath its abdomen, but missing it, even by a fraction, would unleash its petrifying breath. Since Tanaka often narrated his thoughts aloud, the entire streaming audience heard his internal monologue. This new, vital intelligence, delivered so casually, shocked them to their core. People expressed their disbelief, admitting they had never known such a detail. While Tanaka casually referred to it as "not many people know," the viewers universally felt it was more accurate to say, "no one ever knows." A collective gasp of awe and shock rippled through the audience. They had never witnessed a basilisk defeated with such ease. Questions immediately arose. Just how many basilisks had Tanaka hunted to acquire such precise knowledge and skill? Meanwhile, overseas streamers began broadcasting Tanaka's stream, their titles proclaiming, "A real samurai has appeared in Japan." Indeed, Tanaka's stream had now garnered over 10 million views. At this point, Tanaka was a global celebrity, though he remained utterly oblivious. His phone's constant vibrations only served to increase his irritation. Still technically unaware of the global phenomenon he had inadvertently created, Tanaka chose once again to ignore the calls, convinced they were merely insults from his superiors. He simply didn't have the luxury of time for rest, as his next opponent had already materialized. This time, the monster that emerged before him was none other than the tyrant dragon, a creature of S-rank notoriety, assiduously avoided by countless explorers. The tyrant dragon possessed toughness and attack power dozens of times greater than a mere troll. It was a formidable enemy, capable of exhaling superheated air that could melt even solid iron. This information was widely known, not some obscure secret. So, to see Tanaka preparing to confront such a beast did not merely worry the audience, it filled them with outright terror for his life. Some comments openly implored Tanaka to flee, convinced he stood no chance against such an opponent. This was a truly once-in-a-lifetime occurrence, not just for the viewers, but for seasoned explorers as well. Tanaka's stream now boasted over 50 million views, an unprecedented milestone in the history of dungeon streaming. As the atmosphere around him grew palpably tense, Tanaka focused, gathering his strength, determined to bring down this monstrous being in an instant. He had no other choice. Retreat was impossible, marooned as he was in the dungeon's lowest level. Before risking everything, Tanaka meticulously formulated a plan. He knew, with absolute certainty, that the tyrant's fiery breath far surpassed the previous monster's attack. To be struck by it, he understood, meant instant incineration, leaving not even ash. To avert such a terrifying fate, his movements had to be flawlessly executed. Meanwhile, the comments section was a maelstrom of raw nerves. Viewers begged him to run, to escape while there was still time. Some had already accepted Tanaka's grim fate, declaring him a dead man walking. Yet, to their utter astonishment, Tanaka seemed poised to defy every expectation. Though his outward demeanor remained unenthusiastic, a subtle inner thrill, a quiet excitement, hummed within him at the prospect of confronting the tyrant. After all, it wasn't every day one had the opportunity to fell such a majestic creature. Despite the inherent terror and nerve-wracking pressure, Tanaka calmly steadied himself, ensuring his attack would be executed with seamless precision. But before he could even initiate his move, the tyrant unleashed its deadly breath. The scorching heat, the infernal flames billowing from the monster, were undeniably lethal. A typical explorer, lacking Tanaka's profound experience and knowledge, would have been instantly vaporized. But this was Tanaka. Despite the intense agony caused by the searing heat, he held his ground, resolute, determined to fell this monster with a single, decisive blow. With intense concentration, he wielded his sword or katana, slicing the tyrant cleanly in half. His cut was so fluid, so blindingly fast, that the colossal beast had no time to react. In less than a second, the tyrant, feared by all, lay dead, a feat accomplished by Tanaka, a man previously unknown until this very day. This astonishing event immediately seized worldwide attention. Witnessing Tanaka's raw, undeniable power, the comment sections exploded once more, filled with expressions of shock and utter amazement. To defeat an S-rank tyrant dragon in a single attack was, in itself, an incredible achievement. The fact that Tanaka had seemingly materialized from nowhere fueled an intense curiosity. Just who was this unassuming salaryman? Tanaka, for his part, looked only more tired, desperate for it all to be over. But before he could even draw a proper breath, a new wave of dungeon monsters flooded into the scene, denying him any respite. The tyrant Tanaka had just slain, it turned out, was the boss of all monsters on that particular level. With their leader fallen, the remaining creatures seemed to lose all will to fight. Tanaka, too, felt the same, longing desperately for rest. Moreover, a thought nagged at him. His dungeon explorations were purely for work. Any materials he gathered, even from these extra monsters, would go straight to the company. He wouldn't truly benefit from expending additional effort. He had already met his quota, and there seemed no reason to go the extra mile, to waste his precious energy on these lingering foes. Consequently, Tanaka lowered his guard, sheathed his sword, and declared his intention to fight no further. As soon as he indicated to the monsters that they were free to go, they hesitated not a moment, scattering and fleeing without a backward glance. His work was done, and Tanaka felt a surge of gratitude for finishing earlier than anticipated. Having dispatched a significant number of creatures, he decided it was time to collect the necessary materials for his quota and head home as quickly as possible. But before leaving, with his work now complete, Tanaka finally decided to check his phone. He expected to find a few company messages. Instead, a relentless deluge of notifications awaited him. As he clicked on one to investigate, the perpetually poker-faced, dead-eyed, unenergetic salaryman displayed a genuine reaction for the first time. Tanaka was utterly stunned. 9,999 notifications. He knew he'd been getting calls, but this number was absurd, beyond belief. To understand the madness, Tanaka opened one. He saw, to his bewilderment, DTube notifications. Clicking on the DTube icon, his soul nearly departed his body. In that moment, he finally understood. He had been watched by millions of people worldwide. A flicker of frantic desperation crossed Tanaka's face. Why was this happening to him? He was certain he had set the stream settings to company only. But then, the dawning realization, he hadn't. Now fully comprehending his oversight, Tanaka felt a wave of despair, almost to the point of tears. A torrent of random strangers had been watching him the entire time. Yet, a sliver of hope remained. He was, after all, a nobody, and this was his very first stream. Surely, the viewership couldn't have been that large. But to his profound shock, His stream had accumulated over 100 million views, a figure no other streamer had ever achieved. The usually inexpressive Tanaka now displayed a dizzying array of emotions. He had honestly assumed that using a company account would yield perhaps 2,000 subscribers, a perfectly understandable number in his mind. But the reality, a viewership exceeding even that of the most celebrated streamers, simultaneously amazed and terrified him. Meanwhile, the comment section exploded with fresh excitement. Tanaka had finally realized he was streaming. Comments poured in, some humorously claiming to have been present for the entire show, others expressing awe at his incredible, yet emotionless, demeanor. The world, having never before encountered such a powerful, yet outwardly indifferent individual, was desperate to know his name. The hashtag corporate slave swordmaster was now trending globally, not just in Japan. Guilds from every corner of the world clamored for him to join their ranks. Curious viewers, too, yearned to understand the source of his immense strength. Realizing there was no way to quell the situation, Tanaka let out a deep sigh, dropping to his knees. A report would certainly be needed, he thought, a very, very long one. After meticulously clearing the dungeon and gathering all the necessary materials for his quota, Tanaka went straight home, desperate for rest. Instead of sleeping, however, he spent the entire night awake, consumed by worry over the day's unbelievable events. Fast forward to the morning after the streaming incident, Tanaka, wrapped in a blanket on his couch, cautiously checked to see if the internet's fervor had subsided. To his utter astonishment, he remained a global hot topic. Articles about him proliferated across every platform. On a popular news site like Yahoo, Tanaka was the undeniable headline. Corporate slave swordmaster defeats S-rank monster tyrant dragon solo, achieving 100 million viewers in first episode, declared one. Black Dog Guild violating explorer's labor standard act, read another. Experts discuss whether popular video was a fabrication or not, blared a third. These were just a few of the top headlines now dedicated to Tanaka. The situation had spiraled far beyond his control. Tanaka then checked Twitter, another major news channel site, wondering if he was trending there too. Indeed, he was. One user had reposted his recorded live stream, and the comments were nothing short of wild. Viewers praised Tanaka for being super cool and chill, despite his perpetually dead fish eye look. His recorded stream continued to accumulate millions of views, an unprecedented phenomenon for an explorer to gain such immense popularity overnight. At this point, Tanaka simply surrendered, hoping things would calm down in the coming days. Still reeling from the potential impact on his life, Tanaka mused on this buzz, a concept entirely foreign to someone who had spent his entire life immersed in work. Unfamiliar with this newfound fame, he decided to call a friend known for their internet savviness, hoping for some perspective. While Tanaka might be the only individual mad enough to dive solo into the dungeon's lowest level, he never truly considered it a monumental achievement. Sure, he primarily operated alone these days, so he wasn't fully aware of other explorers' skill levels. He certainly didn't expect his own abilities to be so vastly superior. But to truly understand Tanaka, to delve into the man beneath the weary exterior, we must first trace his backstory, to uncover how he arrived at this extraordinary point. It turns out, Tanaka had begun exploring dungeons the moment they first appeared in the world. His initial forays were starkly different from his current, cool and calm confrontations with S-rank monsters. In those early days, Tanaka was weighed down by excessive safety equipment, so profound was his fear of the creatures within. After years of such experiences, he genuinely believed he was strong, but never to an extent that would create such a monumental impact. So he pondered, what had truly drawn so many viewers to him in the first place? Only one explanation seemed plausible: his utterly unappealing appearance as a salaryman. Dressed in a conventional suit, looking indistinguishable from any other office worker, exacerbated by severe dark circles under his eyes, he certainly didn't project the image of an explorer. Reflecting on these subtle details, Tanaka finally concluded that it must be the stark contrast people observed in him, a disparity rarely seen in other explorers, that had ignited this global commotion. Lost in these private thoughts, Tanaka's phone suddenly rang, startling him. He dreaded further attention and even considered disconnecting from DTube entirely. Moreover, he found himself actively avoiding his company. But upon checking the caller ID, it was merely his old friend, Adachi. Adachi was one of Tanaka's few confidants. They had once spent countless hours together. However, Tanaka's all-consuming work had gradually eroded their connection, making him almost forget Adachi existed. He was also quite certain Adachi's call was related to yesterday's events, and to be entirely honest, he wasn't in the mood to discuss it. Yet, Adachi was the only one he felt he could confide in. Reluctantly, he answered. The moment he picked up, Adachi's enthusiastic greeting confirmed Tanaka's suspicion. The call was indeed about yesterday. Without hesitation, Tanaka hung up. To his surprise, Adachi immediately called again and again. Irritated, Tanaka finally answered, demanding to know what he wanted. Their direct, familiar exchange immediately revealed the depth of their long-standing friendship. And, Tanaka realized, he actually needed Adachi's practical wisdom right now. Hanging up again would be his loss. Adachi was a natural conversationalist, possessed a wide social circle, and was undeniably fluent in the intricacies of social media. Tanaka felt certain Adachi could offer a solution to his current predicament. As their conversation finally gained traction, Adachi expressed his genuine admiration for Tanaka's growth over the years. However, flattery was the last thing Tanaka desired. He cut to the chase, asking Adachi what he should do, desperate to deflect the intense public scrutiny. Tanaka wanted to erase all the circulating videos, an impossible task. Adachi explained that Tanaka's unparalleled skills had already been clipped and shared by hundreds of people, spreading across international borders. Tanaka was now not just a headline in Japan, but a global phenomenon. Titles like Appearance of a Real Samurai in Japan were now appearing on international streaming platforms. Adachi had also assessed the severity of this overnight popularity. Tanaka's video had already been translated into 5 languages. Tanaka, on the verge of despair, pleaded for help, hoping someone could calm the escalating situation. Adachi, however, was blunt. There was no way to control it now. Adachi then tried to jar Tanaka back to reality. It seemed Tanaka had become such a quintessential corporate slave that even global fame was something he was prepared to discard. As a true friend, Adachi reminded him that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, one that few people ever experienced. Instead of letting it go to waste, Adachi urged Tanaka to resign from his company and embrace life as a full-time streamer, or influencer, promising it would grant him both time and financial freedom. The thought of quitting his corporate job, however, had simply never occurred to Tanaka until this moment. Adachi, noticing the severe dark circles under Tanaka's eyes, inferred that his friend was likely still being overworked by Suda for a pittance. Though Tanaka struggled with the reality of his corporate captivity, he couldn't deny the truth in Adachi's words. Suda, it turned out, was the president of Tanaka's company. Adachi, Suda, and Tanaka had been classmates, playing together from elementary through middle school, making them childhood friends. However, Tanaka had eventually incurred a significant debt to Suda, irrevocably altering the dynamic of their friendship. Because of this, quitting wasn't a simple option for Tanaka. Tanaka's mention of it finally jogged Adachi's memory. Suda had indeed lent Tanaka money when his parents fell ill. But Adachi realized Tanaka had long since repaid that debt. Yet, the long years of service to the company had fostered a strange attachment, making resignation difficult. Adachi gently reminded Tanaka that it was time to start living for himself, a notion Tanaka had never considered in years, too consumed by his work to even contemplate such a possibility. The mere idea of living for himself made him wonder if he was even allowed to do so. Adachi continued, speculating that Suda had likely told Tanaka, "If you quit here, you'll find no other job opportunities." Tanaka immediately confirmed Adachi's theory, exposing Suda as a truly corrupt, ruthless, and selfish president. As a loyal old friend, Adachi advised Tanaka to disregard Suda's threats. After all, in the wake of yesterday's events, countless guilds were now vying for his talent. Moreover, Tanaka had the option of going freelance if he preferred not to be bound to a company. However, Tanaka, from his long years of experience, was well aware that freelancing rarely brought in substantial income, and he personally doubted his qualifications to convert it into significant cash. Items acquired within dungeons, it was known, could not be directly exchanged for yen. They first had to be converted into a special currency called ji, short for gold. Only then could ji be exchanged for yen. This final exchange, however, required a specific qualification, typically held only by companies, not individuals. It was a cumbersome system, but a necessary one to prevent the economy from utterly collapsing under the influx of valuable dungeon items. This structure underscored the immense worth and expense of dungeon-found goods. The system wasn't unique to Japan. Most other nations likely employed similar regulations. After hearing Tanaka's pragmatic assessment, Adachi clarified his suggestion. He wasn't advocating traditional freelancing, but rather for Tanaka to become a dungeon streamer. As the name implied, a dungeon streamer broadcasted their dungeon dives. Such an occupation didn't require the same qualifications for earning money, and several famous streamers were clearly profiting handsomely. Still, Tanaka questioned whether he was truly up to the task. Recognizing the monumental shift this represented for Tanaka, Adachi spoke with gentle encouragement. He emphasized that he wasn't pushing for an instant transformation. However, if Tanaka decided to embrace this path, Adachi promised his unwavering support. For context, Adachi worked for a company dedicated to supporting explorers, giving him a deep understanding of the dungeon streaming world. Adachi was a genuinely good person, both in character and demeanor, and Tanaka could affirm that he had always been a reliable friend in times of need. Knowing Adachi's expertise and loyalty, Tanaka was certain he could count on his help if he asked. Tanaka expressed his heartfelt gratitude, yet also voiced his profound sadness and surprise at the prospect of leaving his company, a scenario he could barely imagine. The word unemployed felt particularly heavy for someone his age, filling him with hesitation. To lift Tanaka's spirits, even slightly, Adachi confessed that, though he rarely admitted it, he had long admired Tanaka. In fact, Adachi admired explorers in general, seeing those who sacrificed themselves to delve into dungeons for the safety of others as truly commendable. But upon witnessing Tanaka fight, a new thought solidified in Adachi's mind. With individuals as astonishing as Tanaka, perhaps he didn't need to risk his own life in the dungeons. This realization had prompted Adachi to dedicate himself to supporting explorers, specifically hoping to one day champion someone like Tanaka. Tanaka, though sometimes a bit slow to grasp subtle implications, eventually understood the profound meaning behind Adachi's words. For a final time, Adachi urged Tanaka to abandon his current, arduous job, even jokingly offering him a position as a waiter in his own company to ease Tanaka's anxieties about future employment. He also reminded Tanaka that he had just defeated a tyrant dragon, an S-rank monster. Surely, he wouldn't be defeated by someone like Suda. Armed with this much-needed encouragement, Tanaka finally left his apartment, preparing to confront his boss head-on. Tanaka arrived at work early, and just as he anticipated, his boss, Suda, was far from pleased with yesterday's events. Stomping his feet loudly, Suda warned Tanaka to brace himself for what was coming. It was clear Suda despised what Tanaka had inadvertently done. As Suda began to berate Tanaka for his reckless behavior, Tanaka felt his stomach churn with profound stress. In that moment, he realized he was far more susceptible to stress than he had imagined. But thanks to his conversation with Adachi, he could now view the situation more objectively. Otherwise, he might have already surrendered. As Suda continued to bluster about how Tanaka's stream had utterly ruined the company's reputation, he attempted to intimidate Tanaka further, stating that other employees were on their way, and when they arrived, Tanaka would face something gruesome and painful. However, Tanaka remained surprisingly calm and unbothered. In his estimation, Suda's management skills were utterly unremarkable, except when it came to running a truly black company, a term used for exploitative workplaces. This particular skill had utterly worn down both Tanaka's mind and body. While he undoubtedly owed Suda a debt of gratitude, Tanaka now desired to live for himself, and to achieve that, he understood he had to fight for his rights. Suda, meanwhile, insisted his actions were for the good of the company and its employees. Tanaka, however, knew it was a lie, that Suda simply reveled in lecturing those who couldn't fight back, a true scum of the earth, who enjoyed torturing the vulnerable. Tanaka was glad he could finally see through it all, though Suda's presence still made his stomach turn. Despite his determination, a lingering doubt remained in Tanaka's mind. But thanks to Adachi's timely intervention and words of encouragement, Tanaka finally found the courage to stand his ground. While Tanaka waited for the opportune moment to inform Suda of his resignation, Suda continued his tirade, vowing that no matter how much Tanaka begged for forgiveness, even if he cried blood, it would never be granted. It was known that Suda was a former explorer, stronger than the average person. However, he hadn't ventured into a dungeon in a long time. Tanaka was certain he was far stronger than Suda in many respects. Observing Suda's movements, Tanaka noted numerous openings, giving him a 90% advantage in any confrontation. Lost in thought, Tanaka even briefly imagined dispatching Suda in a single second. When he snapped back to reality, his earlier doubt and fear dissipated. He realized, perhaps, he wasn't as scared as he thought. After all, the tyrant dragon was far more terrifying than this man. Maybe his fear before had stemmed from the prospect of being forced to quit. Now, however, he had nothing to fear, and quitting no longer troubled him. Just as Tanaka prepared to make his move, the other employees Suda had mentioned finally arrived. Suda, emboldened, was confident he would teach Tanaka an unforgettable lesson. But would that indeed be the case? To understand Suda's modus operandi, Tanaka offered a brief internal description. Suda, he observed, first coerced employees into explaining themselves, inducing guilt. Then, he would interrupt, shut them down completely, and seize control of the conversation, leaving them too intimidated to speak further. In essence, Suda was a true scoundrel. On any other day, Tanaka would have simply worn the same resigned expression as everyone else. But to simplify things, Tanaka decided to play along with Suda's usual routine. Since Suda wanted him to explain everything that had transpired, Tanaka did so. He admitted to a mistake in the streaming settings, which had inadvertently leaked company work details to the outside world. He acknowledged this as his fault, confirming he was in the wrong. Hearing Tanaka admit his mistakes clearly fed Suda's ego. Tanaka knew that Suda, in his own mind, saw a clear path to breaking him, or so Suda believed. He was unaware that Tanaka was far stronger than he imagined, both physically and emotionally. Until now, Suda's tactics had always worked, but today was different for Tanaka. Even as Suda expected pleas for forgiveness, Tanaka did the right thing. He stood his ground. When Suda demanded to know how Tanaka would compensate for the damage, Tanaka replied firmly that he had already done all he could. He acknowledged the internet's negative perception of the Black Dog Guild, but asserted that the fault lay with their flawed system. Tanaka refused to shoulder the blame for the guild's impending downfall. This was the first time Suda, or anyone present, had ever witnessed Tanaka openly defy his boss. Suda instantly exploded in rage, veins visibly popping, terrifying everyone who overheard the outburst. As Suda began kicking objects in a fit of uncontrolled fury, Tanaka remained utterly unfazed. With an unbothered expression, Tanaka calmly explained to Suda that he was well aware the guild operated as a black company. Now, it seemed, its concealed darkness had been exposed. However, if the revelations concerned practices they weren't engaging in, then it would be Tanaka's responsibility. Unfortunately, it was the company's pervasive wrongdoings that had come to light, and Suda himself had orchestrated this predicament. Suda, however, quickly denied all accusations, attempting to gaslight Tanaka by insisting the company had always paid him the minimum salary and even granted him 1 day off each month. He further added that the Black Dog Guild was the only one that had bothered to hire Tanaka in the first place, implying Tanaka should be eternally grateful to me, Suda, emphasizing his personal role. Hearing these words only further exhausted Tanaka. He silently wished he could conduct a survey to see how many people, upon hearing these well-run guild pronouncements from a black company, would actually agree. But to ensure Suda understood his point, Tanaka gathered his deepest courage and articulated his true sentiments once and for all. With a serious expression, Tanaka plainly stated that Suda was the one embezzling salaries and that the number of days off provided fell short of the Explorer Labor Standard Act. If Suda truly believed no one would notice, he was profoundly mistaken. Instead of admitting his wrongdoing or apologizing, Suda resorted to excuses, claiming his association with the government meant he was the government. At this point, listening to Suda's irrational excuses and egoistic behavior, Tanaka realized the cause was lost. It was a saddening realization, as it was now affecting the guild to its very core. If Suda's behavior remained unchanged, everyone, including the guild itself and its remaining employees, would ultimately suffer. After all, some employees were already pulling out, and Tanaka suspected others would soon follow. Now that Suda had inadvertently admitted to so much, it was time to reveal the full truth. A sudden twist emerged. Tanaka had been streaming their entire conversation on DTube, utilizing a camouflage mode to ensure Suda remained oblivious. This revelation utterly shocked Suda. For the longest time, he had believed he could once again evade the consequences of his actions. Meanwhile, on the internet, the comments section exploded with condemnation for Suda. "Black company quotes pouring out," read one. "I think this is already a police matter," said another. "It's been a while since we had such hype." "Bankruptcy confirmed," declared a third. Tanaka's meticulously planned strategy had worked. The president could no longer escape. Thanks to the stream, the Black Dog Guild's subscriber count had skyrocketed, poised to attract even more viewers. Witnessing the widespread hatred directed at Suda and the guild, Tanaka's plan was undeniably successful. There was no turning back for Suda. This would be his ultimate downfall. Tanaka's co-employees, witnessing his unexpected maneuver, were stunned. Suda, meanwhile, had reached his breaking point, ready to destroy Tanaka at any cost. Realizing his status and respect were irrevocably lost, Suda brandished a blade. Tanaka immediately recognized it as a dungeon-grade weapon, one with high lethality. Removing such an item from a dungeon constituted a breach of the Dungeon Management Act, a crime Suda had clearly committed. As Suda charged, Tanaka was surprised by his slowness. Based on Tanaka's observations, Suda moved even slower than the monsters in the lowest dungeon levels. He might have once been strong, but his current lifestyle had utterly corrupted him. Just as Suda's blow was about to land, Tanaka effortlessly parried, even managing to injure Suda's hand in the process. As Suda screamed in pain, Tanaka coolly informed him that he was finished, that he should understand a little about human pain. To truly equalize and end the confrontation, Tanaka delivered a precise, yet restrained, punch to Suda's stomach, enough to send him flying several meters. Everyone present was shocked by Tanaka's incredible strength. Though it appeared Tanaka had given his all, he had, in fact, held back significantly, ensuring Suda would not die. Tanaka hoped this would be enough to teach Suda a lesson. To his surprise, as Tanaka prepared to leave, Suda struggled to his feet and called out to him. Indeed, Suda, despite his corruption, was a tough former explorer. The sheer spirit he displayed showed he was not yet broken. His immense pride would not allow him to stay down. However, further attacks risked his life. Yet, Suda seemed utterly dedicated to killing Tanaka, going so far as to order his men to pursue Tanaka relentlessly, threatening to cut their pay if they failed. Tanaka found himself amused. The man Suda ordered to take him down was the same promising young employee who had joined the company just the previous year. Though they had never delved into a dungeon together, Tanaka wasn't sure of his full capabilities. However, with no choice but to obey his boss's trembling command, the young man slowly approached Tanaka. As he drew closer, the young man apologized to Tanaka, assuring him he would only attempt to restrain him, not inflict harm. Tanaka, seeing a reflection of his own past powerlessness, offered his blessing, assuring the man he could proceed. Yet, the young man's voice betrayed his deep reluctance. With a surge of courage, he resolved to carry out Suda's orders. But instead of confronting Tanaka directly, the young man aimed for his legs, perhaps hoping to trip him and gain an advantage. While this was a valid tactic for subduing someone, the young man's intentions were clear in his hesitant movements, and he was simply too slow. In an instant, Tanaka effortlessly knocked him down. Though he hated doing it, Tanaka had no choice. Meanwhile, seeing his men so easily defeated by Tanaka enraged Suda even further. He seemed moments away from another explosion. Tanaka, however, had had enough. Instead of fighting, he attempted to reason with Suda, urging him to give up. This entire scene was being streamed, and Suda's continued resistance would only tarnish his image further. But Suda seemed to have lost his mind, desperate to defeat Tanaka no matter the cost. His ego inflated, he insisted the company's growth was solely due to him, and he would ensure Tanaka, the architect of its downfall, was destroyed. Incapable of moving, Suda ordered Gyuta, another of his men, to get Tanaka at all costs. Unlike the previous subordinate, Gyuta was a strong explorer, possessing a rank license, earning Suda's profound reliance. Gyuta was Tanaka's junior, but they had ventured into dungeons together a few times, so Tanaka had a good understanding of his abilities. Tanaka was well aware that Gyuta would not be easily defeated. He pondered how he would manage to overcome this formidable opponent. But to his surprise, as Gyuta approached, he whispered, "Congratulations on finally quitting." It seemed Gyuta had always believed Tanaka was too good for such a corrupt company, seeing that he deserved to fight on a grander stage. This comment from Gyuta utterly surprised Tanaka, as Gyuta rarely spoke during their dungeon dives. Tanaka had always assumed Gyuta disliked him, but Gyuta's words now made Tanaka appreciate him even more. Suda, however, did not share this sentiment. Witnessing one of his supposedly loyal employees turn against him ignited an even deeper rage. He spewed insults, calling Gyuta a lowly scum. But when Gyuta fixed him with a deadly glare, Suda froze, unable to move. Gyuta then conveyed his true feelings to his boss. Tanaka was a senior who had taught him the very foundations of being an explorer. No matter what Suda offered, Gyuta would no longer obey his commands. Besides, Gyuta knew that a serious attack on Tanaka would likely send him to a deathbed. Privately, Tanaka felt this wasn't entirely true, believing Gyuta could put up a good fight. To simplify things for Tanaka, Gyuta offered further assistance. He would stay behind and hold off the president to the best of his ability, allowing Tanaka to leave. At first, Tanaka was shocked by Gyuta's words, but after a moment, the smile he gave Gyuta spoke volumes of his gratitude for having such a remarkable colleague. Meanwhile, Suda, seeing everything turn against him, could barely contain his furious grinding of teeth. Just as Tanaka reached for the doorknob, preparing to finally bid this company farewell, something unexpected happened. The door suddenly slammed open. A long-haired, beautiful woman stood there, ordering everyone to freeze. She introduced herself as a member of the audit section of the association's management bureau, stating they were here to investigate the entire incident. Her striking beauty and elegant, form-fitting attire silenced everyone, including Tanaka. Suda, hearing this, burst into laughter, believing fortune had finally turned in his favor. He warned Tanaka to prepare, certain the tables had now irrevocably shifted. With officials present, Suda was convinced they were after Tanaka, whom he saw as the true criminal behind this entire mess. At this point, Suda was no longer thinking rationally, his composure completely fractured. Tanaka merely stood, observing the unfolding scene. The association's management bureau was an internal department of the Ministry of Monster Control, a government organization. Tanaka knew, with certainty, that they must have received a report from a viewer watching the stream. And the one being reported, he knew, was not him, but Suda. After Suda's overt behavior, it was only natural. Though everyone else seemed to grasp this, Suda remained utterly confused. When officials finally handcuffed him, Suda protested, believing they had mistaken him for Tanaka. He began shouting that Tanaka was the real culprit. Since Suda seemed incapable of comprehending the situation, the beautiful officer directly shut him down, stating that Suda Akihito was being arrested for violating the Explorer Labor Standards Act and the Awakened Special Act. At this point, Suda had no more excuses. His actions and words had been broadcast live. There was no fabricating a defense. Why, Tanaka wondered, had Suda ever thought such behavior was acceptable? Perhaps Suda's tyrannical conduct towards his employees had led to a distorted sense of impunity. But now that the situation was being handled, it seemed to be the end of Suda's malevolent reign over the company. Yet, instead of accepting his fate, Suda continued to insist that Tanaka should have been arrested instead. He argued that Tanaka had used violence against him, a civilian whom awakened individuals were supposed to protect. Since Tanaka's actions were also legally questionable, the official acknowledged Suda had a point. Indeed, the Awakened Special Act prohibited the awakened from using their powers outside of dungeons without permission, especially against ordinary citizens. As mentioned earlier, awakened refers to individuals who have gained special powers due to the presence of magic essence within dungeons entering their bodies. The strength of this awakening varies by individual, and its occurrence depends on innate characteristics. Once awakened, this power can be wielded outside the dungeon, hence the restrictions imposed by the Awakened Special Act. However, despite this truth, the officer asserted that Tanaka had committed no mistake. Hearing this, Suda's last vestiges of hope faded. According to the officer, Tanaka's actions fell within the category of self-defense. If Suda had not been awakened, it might have been deemed excessive. But in this case, both individuals were awakened. Suda bore overwhelming blame, having initiated the conflict and even used a weapon. Even though Suda no longer actively explored dungeons, his past as an explorer meant he was still technically considered awakened. Since the Awakened Special Act primarily applied to confrontations with civilians, Tanaka would face no punishment. However, for clarity, the beautiful officer still requested Tanaka accompany her to the public office. As she looked at him, Tanaka couldn't help but feel he had seen her face before, wondering who she was. Then, after a moment of thought, he realized. It was Amatsuki Kade, the chief of Subjugation Unit 1. This realization utterly shocked Suda. He had never imagined he would encounter her in person. Amatsuki then explained that if an offender was awakened, a member of the subjugation unit must be present during the arrest. In the event of an escape, ordinary officers would be unable to pursue or apprehend them. While Suda was aware of this protocol, he couldn't comprehend why a top official like her would personally handle such a matter. For Tanaka, too, Amatsuki's presence was undeniably strange, given that Suda's case seemed relatively minor. After all, Subjugation Unit 1 was an elite division within the Ministry of Monster Control's Monster Subjugation Bureau, far from an ordinary group. This unit comprised highly skilled awakened members, typically dispatched when monsters unexpectedly appeared in the city. Moreover, the unit was renowned for actively apprehending awakened criminals like Suda, and Amatsuki, as its chief, was recognized as the strongest and most senior official in the city. In a society that often placed limitations on women, Amatsuki defied all expectations, setting an incredibly high standard for everyone, including men. She was strong, intelligent, and strikingly beautiful, the undeniable rising star of the Ministry of Monster Control. Despite being younger than Tanaka, her position as chief of Subjugation Unit 1 underscored her immense talent. And in a surprising twist, Tanaka and Amatsuki had, in fact, once delved into dungeons together, forming a close bond. On one hand, she was an elite, someone not easily approached by ordinary individuals. On the other, Tanaka was merely a corporate slave, toiling away at his office desk. Though they had been incredibly close, the chasm between them had widened significantly over the years. Seeing her here after so long, Tanaka harbored a faint hope that perhaps her presence was specifically for him, that she had chosen to handle this matter personally. However, to Tanaka's dismay, Amatsuki immediately set the record straight, stating there was no profound reason for her presence. She was simply the one available at the time. Tanaka, though, knew Amatsuki was perpetually busy and quietly doubted her explanation. As their eyes met, Amatsuki quickly averted her gaze, leaving Tanaka to wonder if she perhaps held some animosity towards him. To ease the awkwardness, Amatsuki refocused her attention on Suda. Now that he was handcuffed, she ordered the officers to take him away. As they escorted him from the room, Suda's voice, filled with defiant screams, echoed down the hallway. He vowed revenge, promising Tanaka he wouldn't get away with this. Even as he was dragged out, Suda maintained his furious energy until the very end. With this, the commotion surrounding Tanaka's resignation finally concluded. However, it seemed Amatsuki still had business with him. She desired to hear Tanaka's side of the story as well, and so, for now, ordered him to voluntarily accompany her to headquarters. Instead of immediately agreeing, Tanaka inquired if they could postpone it. He simply wanted proper rest, having slept little in weeks. Though Amatsuki was initially reluctant, Tanaka's determination swayed her. She relented. To add a final flourish to his already legendary day, Tanaka, instead of using the front door, decided to exit through the office window, an almost superheroic departure. He privately assured himself that had it been an unknown official, he would have complied. But he reasoned that Amatsuki could tolerate a bit of pampering for now. Before leaping, Tanaka left his business card so Amatsuki could contact him anytime. As Tanaka finally launched himself from the window, Amatsuki made one last attempt to make him stay, confessing she had come all this way just to see him. Tanaka, however, was already in motion, dropping too swiftly to clearly hear her words. Assuming it was merely his imagination, Tanaka pressed onward. Amatsuki, meanwhile, looked crestfallen, unable to truly speak with Tanaka as she had hoped. For Tanaka, Amatsuki seemed to be a distant memory, and she doubted they would ever delve into dungeons together again, given the vast chasm in their societal ranks and positions today. The next day, Tanaka met with Adachi. As his old friend excitedly called his name, Tanaka hushed him, concerned that his newfound notoriety might lead to recognition. Adachi, amused by his friend's celebrity, laughed and began to playfully tease him. Tanaka, feigning annoyance, declared he was simply going home. Adachi, as expected, wouldn't allow it. Since it had been so long since their last encounter, Adachi decided to treat his friend to a meal and a proper conversation. Knowing Adachi wouldn't relent, Tanaka eventually agreed. At the restaurant, Adachi was as chatty as he had been on the phone. Tanaka remained a picture of gloom and exhaustion, while Adachi, in stark contrast, radiated sunshine, constantly smiling and laughing. As an apology for Tanaka's recent ordeal, Adachi offered to treat him to anything he desired, calling it a retirement gift. As they prepared to order, Tanaka stunned both Adachi and the waiter by ordering literally everything on the menu. To Adachi's further horror, this was only Tanaka's first round of orders. Though it undoubtedly traumatized Adachi's wallet, he honored his promise to pay for everything. Joking aside, Adachi understood Tanaka's immense appetite. As an active explorer, constantly in motion, such substantial caloric intake was only natural. Adachi also felt a genuine warmth seeing his friend appear healthier, the dark circles under his eyes visibly diminished. Adachi's comment about his improving health triggered a memory for Tanaka. When he was a corporate slave, he had been a walking corpse. That morning, looking in the mirror, he still seemed merely near death. While still far from looking truly vibrant, Tanaka was grateful for this small progress. But setting that aside for a moment, Tanaka finally asked Adachi what he had truly wanted to discuss. To fill the time until their food arrived, Adachi unveiled a project he had completed during his time away from work. Adachi had literally written an entire guidebook on how to become a successful streamer, specifically for Tanaka's use, knowing Tanaka's previous life offered little insight into the world of streaming. Adachi assured Tanaka there was no need to worry. He would transform him into a world-class streamer in no time. This gesture almost brought Tanaka to tears. To further sweeten the deal, Adachi had even provided Tanaka with a drone for his streams. It was an older model than the one used by the Black Dog Guild, but perfectly functional, a temporary solution until something better could be acquired. Adachi was truly an exemplary friend. Beyond providing equipment, He had also created an account for Tanaka, as streaming was impossible without one. Though Tanaka couldn't use it immediately, Adachi had prudently set it up the day before. With everything arranged, Tanaka could begin streaming the very next day. After all Adachi had done, Tanaka felt a pang of guilt. It felt like too much. He asked Adachi if he was truly sure about doing all this, uncertain if he could repay him any time soon. Adachi smiled, reassuring his friend there was no need to worry. He wasn't so low, he declared, as to leech off an unemployed person. Besides, he was having an immense amount of fun, genuinely looking forward to seeing Tanaka in action. He urged Tanaka not to worry about a thing and just go for it. Hearing such reassuring words, Tanaka fought back tears, offering Adachi his deepest thanks. To mask his surging emotions, Tanaka immediately dove into the food Adachi had ordered. As they ate, enjoying their meal, Adachi brought up another topic. Beyond being a streamer, was Tanaka interested in joining another guild? After all, almost every guild in Japan had tried to recruit him during his stream. Tanaka, however, simply continued eating as if there were no tomorrow, completely ignoring the question. He had no plans to join another guild. At this point, it was merely a matter of time before Tanaka's fate unfolded. Would he truly prosper on his own, or would this new venture bring him more headaches than peace and success?